Alexander the Great, whose image survives today through numerous busts, ancient coins, and classical artwork, remains one of the most enigmatic and powerful figures in ancient history. Born in 356 BCE, in the city of Pella, the capital of Macedon, he was the son of King Philip II and Queen Olympias. From a young age, he exhibited an extraordinary intellect and a deep curiosity about the world, which was nurtured by none other than Aristotle, the famed Greek philosopher, who served as his tutor. Under Aristotle's guidance, Alexander was introduced to a range of disciplines, including philosophy, science, medicine, and literature, laying the intellectual foundation that would later shape his complex approach to governance and war. Even in his youth, Alexander displayed a natural leadership that set him apart from his peers, reportedly taming the wild horse Bucephalus at the age of 12, a feat that impressed his father so deeply that he declared his son destined for greatness. When Philip II was assassinated in 336 BCE, the 20-year-old Alexander ascended to the Macedonian throne. Within a short span, he quashed rebellions across the Greek city-states, securing his dominion over Greece and uniting the previously fractious regions under his command. This consolidation marked the beginning of his ambitious campaign to conquer the vast Persian Empire, setting out with an army of seasoned warriors and an unrelenting drive for conquest. Alexander quickly established himself as a military prodigy. His first significant victory came at the Battle of Granicus in 334 BCE, followed by the pivotal triumph at Issus in 333 BCE, where he famously defeated the Persian king Darius III. As he advanced deeper into Persian territory, Alexander demonstrated a brilliant blend of tactical ingenuity and psychological warfare, often employing unexpected strategies that left his enemies bewildered and demoralized. He continued his relentless march eastward, capturing major Persian cities including Babylon, Susa, and Persepolis, the ceremonial capital. Rather than simply razing these cities, he often chose to incorporate Persian customs into his rule, marrying Roxana, a Bactrian princess, and adopting elements of Persian dress and court etiquette. These acts, though controversial among his Macedonian followers, were part of his broader vision to fuse Greek and Eastern cultures, a policy of integration rather than mere domination. His conquest reached a dramatic peak at the Battle of Gaugamela in 331 BCE, where his army, vastly outnumbered, defeated Darius once more, effectively ending the Achaemenid Empire. Darius fled but was soon murdered by one of his own satraps. With Persia under his control, Alexander declared himself king of Asia, consolidating his empire and beginning the process of administrative reorganization. Alexander's ambitions, however, were far from satisfied. Pushing beyond Persia, he led his army through the rugged terrain of Central Asia, facing fierce resistance and enduring extreme hardships. Yet, his determination never wavered. He founded numerous cities bearing his name, most notably Alexandria, in Egypt, which would later become a hub of learning and culture. In 327 BCE, he crossed the Hindu Kush into the Indian subcontinent, confronting King Porus at the Battle of the Hydaspes River. Though victorious, the battle was grueling, and the bravery of Porus so impressed Alexander that he reinstated him as ruler of his territory. Despite his continuous success, the toll of constant warfare and the reluctance of his weary soldiers eventually forced him to halt his eastward expansion near the Beas River. Faced with the reality of an overstretched campaign and growing dissent among his ranks, Alexander reluctantly turned back, journeying through the inhospitable Gedrosian deserted decision that cost the lives of many soldiers and animals. Upon his return to Babylon in 324 BCE, he began implementing grand plans for the future of his empire. He organized massive feasts, intermarriages between his officers and Persian women, and launched extensive construction projects. He also initiated preparations for new military campaigns, including a potential invasion of Arabia, showing that his ambition remained boundless. Despite these outward signs of energy, the strain of years of campaigning had begun to manifest in his health. He became increasingly withdrawn and erratic, possibly exacerbated by excessive drinking and the psychological weight of his achievements and losses. In June of 323 BCE, at the age of 32, Alexander fell seriously ill in Babylon. Accounts of his final days vary, but most agree that he developed a high fever, progressive weakness, and eventually lost the ability to speak. Speculation about the cause of his death has persisted for centuries, with theories ranging from malaria and typhoid fever to poisoning. though no consensus has been reached. His death stunned the ancient world, as it came at the height of his power, with no clear heir to inherit his vast dominion. The sudden vacuum of authority triggered immediate conflicts among his generals, known as the Diadochi, who vied for control over different regions of the empire, eventually leading to its fragmentation into rival Hellenistic kingdoms. Though his empire did not survive intact, Alexander's legacy endured in profound ways. His campaigns spread Greek culture, language, and ideas across 3 continents, laying the groundwork for what became known as the Hellenistic era. The cities he founded became centers of trade, science, philosophy, and art. In Egypt, the city of Alexandria rose to prominence, home to the legendary Library of Alexandria, a symbol of his intellectual and cultural aspirations. His image, immortalized in marble busts and stamped on ancient coinage, became a symbol of power and charisma. These representations depict him with idealized features, flowing hair, a youthful face, an intense gaze, an image consciously cultivated to project divinity and invincibility. His military strategies continue to be studied in military academies worldwide, from his use of the phalanx formation to his deft handling of cavalry and use of terrain. Alexander's tactics revealed a deep understanding of logistics and human psychology. Yet beyond his battlefield brilliance, his complex personality and actions have spurred endless debate among historians. Some view him as a visionary unifier who dreamt of a global civilization, while others see him as a ruthless conqueror whose empire was built on bloodshed and domination. Regardless of interpretation, the scale and speed of his accomplishments remain unparalleled in ancient history. He created one of the largest empires ever known within a single decade, reshaping the ancient world and leaving behind a cultural and historical imprint that has endured through millennia. As time passed, Alexander's life became the stuff of legend, blending fact and myth. His exploits were chronicled in countless works, and his name became synonymous with greatness. He was emulated by generals, admired by emperors, and revered in both Eastern and Western traditions. From Roman Caesars to Napoleon Bonaparte, many have cited him as a model of leadership and ambition. Even in lands he never ruled, tales of his bravery and intellect spread, with versions of his life appearing in Persian, Arabic, and Indian literature. This mythologizing only added to his mystique, making it difficult to separate the man from the legend. Nonetheless, archaeological evidence, statues, engravings, and coins continues to offer glimpses of the real individual behind the stories. These surviving artifacts serve as powerful reminders of Alexander's enduring presence in world history. Busts carved in marble and bronze present an idealized vision of his youthful features, often with upward tilting eyes meant to signify his divine aspiration. Ancient coins minted during and after his reign depict him with the horns of Ammon, aligning him with divine power and reinforcing his self-image as a god-king. In classical artwork, he is frequently portrayed in heroic poses, astride Bucephalus, or in the heat of battle, surrounded by loyal soldiers and vanquished enemies. These visual representations, though stylized, reflect the deep admiration and awe he inspired among his contemporaries and successors alike. Even centuries after his death, his name evokes a sense of epic grandeur. He remains a symbol of youthful ambition, unrelenting courage, and the fleeting nature of glory. While the empires he conquered have long vanished, and the cities he founded have transformed or disappeared, the legend of Alexander the Great endures, suspended in marble, etched in silver, and painted across the canvas of human history. His was a life of blazing intensity, marked by astonishing achievements, personal complexities, and a relentless drive that refused to be contained by geography or tradition. From the dusty plains of Macedonia to the banks of the Indus, his footsteps altered the course of civilizations, and his memory continues to inspire wonder, debate, and admiration. Socrates, a name that resonates through the corridors of philosophical thought, remains one of the most iconic figures of ancient Athens. Though much of what we know about him comes not from his own writings, but from the accounts of his students and contemporaries. Classical busts and artistic impressions have immortalized his distinctive features: bald head, broad nose, and penetrating eyes, capturing not the appearance of a conventional nobleman, but the visage of a thinker whose life altered the trajectory of human understanding. These depictions, though idealized, convey a sense of depth and reflection that complement the vivid portrayals found in the dialogues of Plato and Xenophon. Born around 470 BCE, in the Athenian deme of Alapis, Socrates emerged from humble origins. The son of Sophroniscus, a stonemason, and Phanerit, a midwife. Though his family was not wealthy, the young Socrates received a typical Athenian education, studying music, gymnastics, poetry, and geometry, which laid the foundation for his later intellectual pursuits. He spent part of his early life as a soldier, fighting in several campaigns during the Peloponnesian War, where his courage and endurance in battle earned him the admiration of his peers. Despite the physical hardships of military life, Socrates maintained a reputation for his resilience, walking barefoot in harsh conditions, and demonstrating a remarkable indifference to material comfort. His personal appearance and lifestyle became the subject of both admiration and ridicule. In Athens, known for his eccentric habits, unkempt attire, and lack of concern for wealth or status, Socrates became a fixture of the Athenian agora, engaging in endless conversations with fellow citizens of all social backgrounds. He rejected the formal methods of teaching employed by the sophists, and instead embraced a method of inquiry based on asking questions, a practice later termed the Socratic method. This approach involved challenging assumptions through dialectical reasoning, guiding his interlocutors to examine their beliefs and uncover contradictions within them. His goal was not to impart knowledge, but to awaken critical thinking, helping others to realize their own ignorance and strive for intellectual clarity. Socrates saw philosophy not as an abstract discipline, but as a daily practice, essential to the well-being of the soul. He often compared his role to that of a midwife, assisting others in giving birth to their own ideas. Unlike many of his contemporaries, he took no payment for his teaching, believing that wisdom should not be commodified. His commitment to philosophical inquiry extended to ethical questions, with a particular emphasis on virtue, justice, and the examined life. He believed that true happiness could only be achieved through a life of moral integrity, and that knowledge was inseparable from virtue. Those who knew what was right would naturally do it, he asserted, suggesting that wrongdoing stemmed from ignorance rather than malice. This view positioned Socrates as a radical voice in Athenian society, challenging conventional morality and the authority of those in power. Over time, his relentless questioning and perceived subversiveness attracted criticism and suspicion. Many Athenians came to associate him with the decline of traditional values and the rise of dangerous ideas. This perception was exacerbated by the actions of some of his former associates, such as Alcibiades and Critias, who were linked to political upheavals and betrayal during the volatile period of the late 5th century BCE. Despite having no direct involvement in their decisions, Socrates became a scapegoat for the broader dissatisfaction felt in the aftermath of Athens' defeat in the Peloponnesian War. In 399 BCE, he was formally charged with impiety and corrupting the youth of Athens. The trial that followed has become one of the most famous in history, not only for its outcome but for the philosophical principles it brought into sharp focus. During his defense, as recorded by Plato in the Apology, Socrates remained defiant and unapologetic. He asserted that he had done no wrong, claiming instead that his mission was divinely inspired and that his questioning served to benefit the city. He argued that silencing him would be a disservice to Athens, likening himself to a gadfly stirring a sluggish horse. His refusal to pander to the jury or beg for mercy reflected his unwavering commitment to truth and his belief that it was better to suffer injustice than to commit it. He rejected the idea of proposing an alternative punishment that would compromise his principles, famously suggesting that instead of condemnation, he deserved to be honored by the city for his service to philosophical enlightenment. His refusal to abandon his values ultimately led to a guilty verdict, and he was sentenced to death by drinking a concoction of hemlock. The final moments of Socrates' life have been poignantly captured in the writings of Plato, particularly in the dialogue Phaedo, which describes the philosopher's last hours among his followers. Surrounded by friends and disciples, he spent his remaining time discussing the immortality of the soul and the nature of the afterlife. He approached death with calmness and composure, reinforcing his lifelong belief that a true philosopher does not fear death but regards it as a transition to a higher state of understanding. As he drank the hemlock and the poison gradually took effect, he continued to reason with clarity, offering comfort to his grieving companions. His death marked not the end of his influence, but the beginning of a legacy that would profoundly shape the course of Western thought. Though he left no written records, the philosophical contributions of Socrates endure through the accounts of his students, especially Plato, whose dialogues serve as both a tribute and a transmission of his ideas. In these works, Socrates is portrayed not merely as a thinker but as a moral exemplar, whose life embodied the principles he espoused. His approach to ethics, his emphasis on reason, and his relentless pursuit of truth laid the foundation for much of Western philosophy. The method of critical questioning that he pioneered remains a cornerstone of education and intellectual discourse. He inspired countless generations of thinkers, from Aristotle to the modern era, who continued to grapple with the questions he first posed. Artists across the centuries have sought to capture the essence of Socrates in sculpture and painting, often emphasizing his distinctive features and serene expression. Classical busts portray him with a visage that defies the idealized beauty of Greek statuary, instead conveying the strength of character and intellectual intensity that defined his life. These artistic impressions have served as enduring symbols of philosophical virtue and have ensured that his image remains familiar even to those who have never studied his teachings. The contrast between his physical appearance and the depth of his thoughts serves as a reminder that true wisdom lies not in external appearances, but in the capacity for introspection and dialogue. In the centuries that followed his death, Socrates was venerated not just as a philosopher, but as a martyr for truth and intellectual freedom. His trial and execution have been cited as examples of the dangers posed by intolerance and the suppression of dissent. Thinkers in various historical epochs, from the Enlightenment to modern democratic movements, have invoked his name in defense of free inquiry and the right to question authority. His story remains a powerful narrative of personal integrity, courage in the face of persecution, and the enduring value of philosophical inquiry, even in an age far removed from his own. His example challenges individuals to examine their lives, question their assumptions, and strive for a deeper understanding of themselves and the world around them. Through the lasting power of his ideas and the vividness of his historical presence, Socrates continues to provoke thought, inspire dialogue, and model a life committed to the pursuit of wisdom. His impact transcends time and geography, reaching into classrooms, courtrooms, and conversations wherever people seek to understand the nature of justice, the purpose of life, and the meaning of knowledge. His death, though a moment of profound loss, served as a catalyst for the flourishing of philosophical tradition, ensuring that his voice would echo through the ages. In honoring his memory through art, literature, and reflection, humanity pays tribute to one of its most remarkable minds, whose legacy lives on, not only in marble busts and written dialogues, but in the very spirit of philosophical inquiry that he so passionately championed. Plato, one of the towering figures in the history of philosophy, has been immortalized through countless busts and paintings, his image frequently appearing in academic books, classrooms, and scholarly illustrations. These artistic representations depict him with a contemplative gaze, flowing beard, and a composed demeanor that reflects the intellectual gravitas attributed to him. While most of these images are idealized and were produced long after his death, they continue to shape our collective imagination of the man whose ideas profoundly influenced Western thought. Born around 428 or 427 BCE into an aristocratic Athenian family, Plato's early life was marked by privilege, providing him access to an education that would foster his intellectual development. His lineage was distinguished, with his father, Aristotle, claiming descent from the early kings of Athens, and his mother, Pryxian, being related to the revered lawmaker, Solon. This heritage placed him among the elite of Athenian society. Yet his life would veer toward the pursuit of philosophical truth, rather than political ambition. In his youth, Plato was exposed to poetry, music, mathematics, and gymnastics, developing both a sharp mind and a strong physique. He initially aspired to become a playwright, writing dramatic works that likely reflected the artistic currents of his time. However, his trajectory changed drastically after encountering Socrates, whose method of dialectical questioning and ethical inquiries left an indelible impression on him. Plato became a devoted student of Socrates and witnessed firsthand the power of philosophical dialogue to unravel the complexities of human behavior, morality, and justice. The trial and execution of Socrates in 399 BCE had a profound effect on Plato, who viewed the event as a miscarriage of justice and a sign of the flaws inherent in Athenian democracy. Disillusioned with politics and civic institutions, he turned increasingly toward philosophy as a means of understanding the ideal forms of governance, ethics, and knowledge. Following Socrates' death, Plato traveled extensively, seeking wisdom and broadening his intellectual horizons. His journeys took him to regions such as Egypt and possibly Italy, where he came into contact with Pythagorean teachings and other ancient systems of thought. These experiences enriched his philosophical framework and informed the development of his metaphysical theories. Upon returning to Athens, he founded the Academy around 387 BCE, an institution dedicated to the pursuit of philosophical inquiry and scientific learning. The Academy attracted students from across the Greek world and served as a model for later centers of learning. Plato's commitment to rigorous analysis and structured education marked a turning point in the institutionalization of philosophy as an academic discipline. Among his students was Aristotle, who would later chart his own philosophical course while building on the foundations laid by his teacher. Plato's writings, preserved in the form of dialogues, remain among the most influential texts in the philosophical canon. In these works, Socrates often serves as the central figure, engaging in profound discussions on topics such as justice, beauty, love, knowledge, and the nature of reality. While it is difficult to distinguish Plato's own views from those of his mentor, his later dialogues increasingly reflect original ideas and elaborate metaphysical concepts. One of his most enduring contributions is the theory of forms, which posits that the material world is only a shadow of a higher realm of perfect, immutable entities. According to this view, true knowledge lies not in sensory perception but in the intellectual apprehension of these eternal truths. This distinction between appearance and reality became a cornerstone of Platonic philosophy and has had far-reaching implications in fields ranging from theology to political science. Another significant aspect of Plato's thought is his conception of the ideal state. As articulated in works such as The Republic, he envisioned a society governed by philosopher-kings individuals who possess both wisdom and virtue, arguing that only such leaders could ensure justice and harmony within a community. He divided society into three classes: rulers, auxiliaries, and producers, each corresponding to different parts of the soul and fulfilling distinct roles in maintaining order. This vision, though utopian, was deeply rooted in Plato's desire to address the ethical and political failures he observed in his own time. He believed that only through education and philosophical reasoning could individuals rise above ignorance and selfishness to contribute meaningfully to the common good. Plato's philosophical contributions extended beyond political theory and metaphysics. He also engaged deeply with epistemology, exploring the nature and limits of human knowledge. In dialogues such as Meno and Theaetetus, he investigated whether virtue can be taught and what it means to know something. He emphasized the importance of recollection, proposing that the soul, being immortal, retains knowledge from previous existences, and that learning is a process of uncovering what is already known. His allegories and metaphors, most famously, the allegory of the cave, convey complex ideas through vivid imagery, allowing readers to grasp abstract concepts through narrative and symbolism. These literary techniques demonstrate not only his philosophical depth, but also his mastery of language and storytelling. In addition to his intellectual achievements, Plato's legacy is also reflected in the visual arts. Busts of Plato, often crafted during the Roman period, present an image of serene dignity and introspection, capturing the philosopher in a timeless pose of contemplation. These sculptures, though produced centuries after his death, have become iconic representations of wisdom and are commonly found in universities, libraries, and museums. Paintings inspired by his life and ideas often depict him in dialogue with Socrates or engaged in teaching at the Academy, reinforcing his role as a central figure in the philosophical tradition. One of the most renowned artistic tributes is Raphael's fresco, The School of Athens, which portrays Plato alongside Aristotle and other classical thinkers, symbolizing the enduring influence of Greek philosophy on Renaissance and modern thought. Despite his monumental status, details about the final years of Plato's life remain sparse. It is believed that he continued to teach and write until his death, which likely occurred around 348 or 347 BCE. Some accounts suggest that he died peacefully in Athens at an advanced age, possibly in his early 80s. His death marked the end of an era, but his ideas continued to flourish through the efforts of his students and the preservation of his works. The academy he founded persisted for nearly 1,000 years, surviving various political upheavals and evolving into a beacon of intellectual activity. Its endurance is a testament to the foundational role that Plato played in shaping the philosophical landscape of antiquity and beyond. The widespread inclusion of Plato's image and writings in academic texts underscores his lasting relevance. His philosophical system provided a framework for medieval scholasticism, informed the development of Christian theology, and laid the groundwork for modern rationalism. Thinkers across epochs have engaged with his ideas, either embracing, refining, or challenging them. His dialogues remain required reading for students of philosophy, not only for their content but for their method of inquiry and the example they set in the pursuit of truth. Even today, the questions Plato posed about justice, knowledge, and the soul continue to provoke reflection and debate, demonstrating the timeless quality of his thought. In the realm of education, Plato's influence is particularly pronounced. His vision of a structured, values-based educational system has inspired models of schooling that emphasize critical thinking, moral development, and the cultivation of reason. The Platonic ideal of harmonizing the faculties of the mind and soul has shaped pedagogical approaches across cultures and centuries. His emphasis on dialogue as a tool for learning remains relevant in modern classrooms, where inquiry-based methods draw directly from his legacy. In this sense, Plato is not merely a figure of historical interest, but an active presence in contemporary discourse, continually challenging individuals to examine their assumptions and strive for greater understanding. Through artistic representation, literary legacy, and philosophical influence, Plato has transcended the boundaries of time and culture. His contributions are not confined to dusty volumes or scholarly discussions, but permeate the very foundations of intellectual life. The sculpted busts that line academic halls and the paintings that adorn historical galleries serve as reminders of his enduring impact, while his words continue to inspire those who seek wisdom and clarity. As long as the human spirit remains curious and reflective, the legacy of Plato will endure, guiding minds through the labyrinth of thought and into the realm of higher understanding. His life, marked by contemplation, teaching, and the relentless pursuit of truth, stands as a testament to the power of philosophy to elevate and illuminate the human condition. Aristotle, a name that reverberates through the centuries, stands as one of the most influential thinkers in the history of philosophy and science. His likeness, preserved through ancient busts and later reimagined in Renaissance illustrations, continues to symbolize intellectual rigor and comprehensive knowledge. The busts, often depicting a calm and reflective figure with a beard and furrowed brow, were designed to embody wisdom and authority. Renaissance artists, captivated by the revival of classical knowledge, frequently portrayed Aristotle in illuminated manuscripts, frescoes, and academic texts, surrounding him with symbols of inquiry and study. These visual depictions underscore his timeless role as a teacher, theorist, and observer of the natural world. Born in 384 BCE in the city of Stagira, in northern Greece, Aristotle came from a family closely tied to the medical profession. His father, Nicomachus, served as the physician to the royal court of Macedon, a connection that likely introduced the young Aristotle to systematic observation and inquiry, principles that would shape his later work. Orphaned at a young age, Aristotle was taken under the care of a guardian and sent to Athens at around 17 to study at Plato's academy. He remained there for 2 decades, immersing himself in the teachings of Plato and the intellectual environment of the academy. Although deeply influenced by Plato, Aristotle eventually diverged from his teacher's emphasis on abstract forms, favoring instead a more empirical and practical approach to knowledge. After Plato's death, Aristotle left Athens and traveled across the Greek world, spending time in Asia Minor and on the island of Lesbos, where he conducted extensive research on marine life and developed his interests in biology. These years of exploration and teaching broadened his perspective and allowed him to refine his own philosophical system, which emphasized observation, categorization, and logical analysis. In 343 BCE, Aristotle was invited by King Philip II of Macedon to tutor his young son, Alexander, who would later become Alexander the Great. During his time at the Macedonian court, Aristotle not only influenced the future conqueror, but also gained access to extensive resources and opportunities for scientific study. His teachings likely included subjects ranging from ethics and politics to literature and science, reflecting the comprehensive nature of his thought. After several years in Macedon, Aristotle returned to Athens and founded his own school, the Lyceum. Unlike Plato's academy, the Lyceum placed greater emphasis on empirical research, systematic classification, and the collection of data. Aristotle and his students engaged in wide-ranging investigations, compiling observations on subjects such as zoology, meteorology, physics, logic, and metaphysics. The school became a hub of intellectual activity and set a precedent for the modern research institution. Aristotle's writings span nearly every field of knowledge known in his time. He developed formal logic, introducing the concept of the syllogism, a method of deductive reasoning that became foundational in Western thought. His work in metaphysics explored the nature of being, substance, and causality, offering frameworks for understanding existence and change. In ethics, he introduced the notion of the golden mean, suggesting that virtue lies in moderation between extremes. His treatise on politics examined various forms of government and advocated for a balanced constitutional regime. In literary theory, his Poetics provided the earliest surviving work of dramatic criticism, analyzing the structure of tragedy and the emotional effects of art. His approach combined careful observation with rational interpretation, making him not only a philosopher but a pioneering scientist. Throughout his life, Aristotle maintained a profound belief in the power of reason and experience as tools for uncovering truth. He saw philosophy as a means of achieving knowledge through understanding causes and purposes. His emphasis on teleology, the idea that all things have an inherent purpose, pervaded his explanations of nature and human behavior. This perspective shaped his study of biology, where he classified organisms based on their characteristics and attempted to discern their functions and roles within the natural order. Although some of his biological theories were later revised, his methodology laid the groundwork for the scientific process. His intellectual reach extended far beyond the confines of a single discipline, making him a true polymath whose legacy would influence fields as diverse as astronomy, psychology, and economics. Aristotle's reputation endured long after his death, particularly through the preservation and translation of his works by scholars in the Islamic world. During the Middle Ages, his texts were reintroduced to Western Europe through Arabic translations and commentaries, sparking renewed interest in logic, natural philosophy, and metaphysics. Renaissance humanists celebrated Aristotle as a guiding figure in the quest for knowledge, incorporating his teachings into the curricula of universities and seminaries. Artists and scholars of the Renaissance depicted him in robes of contemplation, often holding scrolls or surrounded by celestial instruments, underscoring his status as the quintessential sage. His influence permeated theological debates, philosophical treatises, and scientific investigations, reinforcing his central role in the development of Western intellectual traditions. Despite his towering status, Aristotle's personal life remained somewhat obscure. He was married to Pythias, the niece of his patron Hermias of Atarneus, and they had a daughter also named Pythias. After his wife's death, he reportedly lived with a companion named Hercules, with whom he had a son Nicomachus. It was to this son that Aristotle dedicated his work on ethics. In the final years of his life, political unrest in Athens led to renewed anti-Macedonian sentiment, placing Aristotle in a precarious position due to his connections with the Macedonian royal family. Facing the threat of prosecution, he withdrew to the city of Chalcis on the island of Euboea. There, in 322 BCE, he died of natural causes, possibly due to a digestive illness. His passing marked the end of a prolific career, but the ideas he developed continued to evolve and resonate through successive generations. The survival of Aristotle's works is partly due to the efforts of later scholars who collected, preserved, and commented on his manuscripts. Although some of his writings were likely intended as lecture notes or private teachings rather than polished publications, they offer a remarkable glimpse into the breadth of his thought. His systematic approach and commitment to empirical study made him a model for rational inquiry, and set the stage for the scientific revolution. The admiration for Aristotle extended well into the modern period, where his contributions were reassessed and integrated into the framework of emerging disciplines, while some of his theories were ultimately revised or replaced. His influence remained foundational. Aristotle's visual legacy complements his intellectual achievements. Ancient busts carved in marble portray him with an air of wisdom and gravity, intended to evoke respect and admiration. These statues, housed in museums and academies, continue to serve as enduring symbols of classical knowledge. During the Renaissance, artists like Raphael and others included Aristotle in paintings alongside fellow philosophers, often placing him at the center of philosophical debate. His representation in the school of Athens, standing beside Plato and gesturing toward the earth, signifies his emphasis on empirical observation and practical wisdom. These images not only preserve his likeness, but also encapsulate his philosophical approach, contrasting with Plato's idealism through their symbolic gestures and expressions. Academic books across disciplines frequently feature Aristotle's image, serving as a visual reminder of his foundational role in shaping intellectual inquiry. Whether adorning the covers of philosophical treatises or illustrating chapters in science textbooks, his portrait remains a fixture in educational materials. These representations reflect not only historical reverence, but also an acknowledgement of his continued relevance. His questions about ethics, logic, and the natural world remain central to ongoing debates, prompting scholars and students alike to revisit his arguments and apply them to contemporary challenges. Through the combination of visual representation and written legacy, Aristotle's influence extends into every realm of knowledge and continues to inspire the pursuit of wisdom. His ability to articulate complex ideas with clarity, to observe the world with precision, and to synthesize vast bodies of knowledge into coherent systems makes him one of the most remarkable minds of antiquity. His life, spent in relentless inquiry and passionate teaching, exemplifies the highest aspirations of the philosophical tradition. The fact that his image continues to grace scholarly works and artistic tributes centuries after his death speaks to the enduring power of his thought. As a thinker, educator, and scientist, Aristotle occupies a place of honor in the annals of human history. His name synonymous with intellectual excellence and the unending search for truth. The marble busts and illustrated volumes that bear his likeness are not mere artifacts, but enduring testaments to a legacy that has shaped civilizations and continues to guide the human spirit in its quest to understand the world. Confucius, a revered sage of ancient China, has long been celebrated through scroll paintings, statues, and scholarly portraits that reflect the dignity and moral clarity he brought to the cultural and political life of his time. In these visual representations, he is often depicted wearing traditional robes, his expressions serene and wise, embodying the virtues he so tirelessly advocated. Artists across centuries have sought to capture the essence of his philosophy: filial piety, respect, justice, and ritual through intricate brushwork and carefully constructed compositions. These images, found in temples, schools, and homes, not only honor his legacy, but also serve as daily reminders of ethical living. Born in 551 BCE in the state of Lu, in what is now Shandong province, Confucius came into the world during the tumultuous spring and autumn period, a time marked by political instability and social upheaval. His birth name was Kang Qiu, and he later came to be known as Kang Fuzi, meaning Master Kang, which was Latinized by Jesuit missionaries into Confucius centuries later. Though his family descended from a noble lineage, they lived in modest circumstances, and Confucius experienced hardship early in life, especially following the death of his father when he was only a child. Despite these challenges, Confucius pursued learning with unrelenting determination, displaying a passion for knowledge and a commitment to moral integrity that set him apart. From a young age, he immersed himself in the study of history, poetry, music, and ritual, disciplines that would form the foundation of his teachings. He believed in the transformative power of education, not just for personal development, but for the cultivation of a just society. In his early adulthood, he held minor government positions, including roles as a clerk and supervisor of granaries and livestock. These positions offered him first-hand experience in administration and the workings of governance, further fueling his desire to restore ethical order and harmony within the political system. Confucius developed a vision of society governed by virtuous leaders, where rulers earned the respect of their subjects through moral example rather than coercive force. As he grew in stature and knowledge, Confucius attracted a circle of devoted followers who were inspired by his wisdom and philosophical clarity. He began to teach a wide range of students, emphasizing that education should be accessible to all, regardless of social background. His teachings centered on the concept of ren, often translated as benevolence or humaneness, which he regarded as the highest virtue. This moral quality, he taught, should guide every aspect of human behavior, from family relationships to political leadership. He also emphasized li, the observance of rituals and propriety, as a means to cultivate respect and social harmony. Together, these principles formed the basis of his ethical system, which prioritized character development, social responsibility, and adherence to a moral compass. Confucius believed that a well-ordered society depended on the cultivation of virtue at every level, beginning with the individual. He taught that self-discipline, humility, and a commitment to righteousness were essential qualities for anyone seeking to influence others. His model of the junzi, or gentleman, served as an ideal for personal conduct, a person of noble character who acted with integrity and treated others with fairness. although he never considered himself a prophet or divine figure. His insights carried profound spiritual weight and were grounded in a deep respect for tradition and ancestral wisdom. His reverence for the past was not merely nostalgic, but pragmatic. He saw in the ancient rites and texts a blueprint for restoring societal balance and ethical governance. During his lifetime, Confucius aspired to implement his ideas within the political realm. He served for a time as Minister of Justice in Lu, and during his brief tenure, the state experienced a period of increased order and respect for the law. However, his commitment to principle eventually led to conflict with powerful elites, who viewed his moral rigor as a threat to their authority. Disillusioned by court politics and the failure of his reforms to gain lasting traction, Confucius left Lu and embarked on a long journey across various states in search of a ruler who would embrace his vision of virtuous governance. Accompanied by his disciples, he traveled for over a decade, offering counsel to leaders and engaging in philosophical dialogue. Although he was respected and often welcomed, none of the rulers he encountered were willing to adopt his ideas fully, and he was never given the opportunity to implement his reforms on a large scale. Eventually, Confucius returned to Lu, where he spent his later years focusing on teaching and compiling classical texts. He edited and transmitted important works, such as the Book of Songs, the Book of Documents, and the Spring and Autumn Annals, contributing to the preservation of China's intellectual heritage. These texts, along with the Analecta collection of his sayings recorded by his disciples, became the core of Confucian literature and would go on to shape Chinese education, governance, and social conduct for millennia. He continued to teach until his death in 479 BCE at the age of 72, though his final years were marked by disappointment over his limited political success. His philosophical contributions would soon resonate far beyond the confines of his own life and time. Following his death, Confucius was venerated by successive generations of scholars, officials, and rulers. During the Han Dynasty, Confucianism was established as the official ideology of the state, with his teachings forming the basis for civil service examinations and bureaucratic training. Temples dedicated to his memory were built throughout China, housing tablets inscribed with his name and images depicting him as the sage par excellence. Statues portrayed him as a wise elder, holding scrolls and exuding calm authority. In Chinese scroll paintings, he appeared in serene landscapes, surrounded by disciples, or standing before ancient texts, visually reinforcing his role as a teacher and moral guide. These artistic tributes conveyed not only reverence for his intellect, but also an enduring belief in the values he espoused. His legacy expanded beyond China, influencing the cultures of Korea, Japan, and Vietnam, where Confucian ideals were adapted to local contexts and became embedded in education systems and state ideologies. Throughout East Asia, Confucius was honored not merely as a historical figure, but as a symbol of ethical wisdom and cultural continuity. His emphasis on respect for elders' loyalty and learning resonated across generations, shaping family structures, educational practices, and societal expectations. Renaissance scholars in Europe, encountering his works through translations and Jesuit reports, admired his moral philosophy and began to compare his ideas with those of Western thinkers, recognizing in him a universal advocate for ethical reasoning and social harmony. In modern times, Confucian values continue to inform debates about education, leadership, and civic responsibility. His vision of a society guided by ethical leaders remains deeply relevant in an era marked by rapid change and moral uncertainty. Statues of Confucius stand not only in temples but also in universities, museums, and public squares around the world, testifying to the global reach of his thought. Chinese scroll paintings and calligraphic renderings of his maxims are still revered as cultural treasures, bridging the ancient and the contemporary. The enduring power of his image and ideas speaks to the depth of his insight and the universal appeal of his ethical teachings. Confucius did not write grand treatises or seek personal glory. Instead, he dedicated his life to the cultivation of character and the betterment of society through wisdom and virtue. His method of teaching, conversational, reflective, and rooted in lived experience, continues to inspire educators and thinkers. The profound influence of his life can be felt in the values of respect, duty, and lifelong learning that remain central to many societies. Though he passed away over 2,000 years ago, the presence of Confucius lives on in the hearts and minds of those who seek to live with integrity and purpose. His statues gaze serenely over bustling cities and quiet academies alike, while painted scrolls continue to depict the philosopher whose teachings turn the tide of history and continue to guide the human spirit toward harmony and understanding.